Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Follow Up. My name is James and I'm here with a member of our teaching team, Ryan. Ryan, good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, buddy?
I'm great. I just got back from vacation, so I feel like I'm getting back into it.
Look at you. Where'd you go?
Hopping back in. We went to the Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. And it was great. We just did a lot of hikes and just chilled. It was a family reunion, so just played a lot of spike ball and hung out by the campfire. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
man.
Did that for a week.
That sounds refreshing, relaxing.
It was refreshing. It was great. Got in the lake and it's like all mountain runoff, so it's super cold.
Oh, nice.
Like found a rope swing on this little island. It was pretty fun.
Dude, let's just talk about that today.
Yeah, it was great.
Let's follow up on
what God
vacation.
was what God was teaching me through this. No, it was good. But we've been in this series called Strong and Courageous, and you stepped up to the plate this week.
I did.
And so a little short notice, but you did a great job. So can you tell us a little bit about what our series Strong and Courageous has been all about?
Yeah, so we're in the book of Joshua, and Joshua is an incredible book where Joshua takes over to lead the Israelite people into the promised land. And in the process, they go and they conquer some places and they cross over the Jordan rivers we talked about a couple weeks back. And he does some incredible things, but each step along the way, God is asking him to be strong and courageous because he's got to take steps of faith, next steps of faith in order to walk into whatever God has in store for him and the Israelite people. And so that's what we've been walking through in this series. We've been looking at a chronological story of Joshua leading these people through.
So we are a little further into the way Joshua has taken the reins. He's leading this group of people, and they're kind of coming against like some trials, kind of enemies kind of coming on different sides. This week it was the 5 different kings kind of combining their armies to take them on. And so we're kind of into the thick of the story a little bit. So we were in Joshua 9 through 10, kind of in a couple of those different areas. But could you tell us a little bit of just the passage and the story of what we talked about? It was a lot of scripture. So if you want to read it, it's in Joshua chapters 9 and 10 is kind of where we spent most of our time. But can you summarize that story for us?
Yeah, so we've got Joshua, and Joshua just conquered Jericho. The Israelites, they marched around the city 7 times. The walls came down. They go in and they conquer Jericho. And then they conquer Ai. And then these kings from these other surrounding towns and these other surrounding areas are like, wait a minute, they're gonna conquer.
They're coming for us next. They're just working their way around.
One at a time, they can pick us all off. And so they came together and they said, we can defeat them together if we come together and form an alliance. And so they form an alliance. It'd be similar like, okay, I enjoy wrestling with my kids.
Okay, yeah.
Something I enjoy doing. And here's the deal. I can beat them up. And
Dax can't take you?
They cannot take me. Individually, they cannot take me.
That's interesting. I'm surprised the 65-pound frame can't handle it.
I know, right? Yeah, that 8-year-old I just gonna toss around. But the 3 of them, when all 3 of them get together, like it becomes a challenge at that point because they can attack me from all different sides. And so these kings did the same thing. They were like, let's get all 5 of our armies together and let's go after the Israelites. Yeah. Well, there's this one group of people called the Gibeonites who are just kind of hanging out on their own. And they're like, no, we got a better plan. And so their plan was literally to go to Joshua and to say to Joshua, hey, Joshua, we're not from here. We're not even from here. We happen to be passing through town. Will you protect us? They were the town next door.
Yeah, they're trying to hoodwink him.
Yeah, they were literally next door, and they knew that Joshua and the Israelites were coming their direction next, and they were like, no, we gotta get in front of this. And so they go to Joshua. They trick Joshua into this treaty. Joshua doesn't pray about it, the Bible says. He makes this decision quickly, and Joshua's like, yeah, we'll protect you. Well, then Joshua finds out, actually, you live next door. Like you're the next town we were coming after. But these 5 kings hear about this. They hear about this thing that Joshua and these Gibeonites have done. And so now they've declared war on the Gibeonites. Yeah. And so these 5 kings have now come towards Gibeon and said, all right, guys, we're going to fight you now. And Gibeon runs back to Joshua and they say, hey, please, will you honor this treaty anyway? Yeah. Just a crazy story. I don't know what you would do, James, in that situation.
My like gut instinct would be like, yeah, I'm not gonna. You lied to us, so the treaty is null and void.
Yeah, right. Like go,
congrats.
Go fight.
Enjoy.
Go fight these 5 armies. Have fun. But the other side of that too is that they very easily could have gone back to the other people and said, we made a mistake. We're joining your forces. Yeah. And then it's just 6 armies now that the Israelites have to face. So whatever. Right?
Yeah, it all works out.
Joshua, being a man of God, being a man of integrity, is like, you lied to me. That's fine. We'll still do this thing anyway. So he keeps the treaty. They go, and then Joshua has to round up all of his army. And I love the story. Now we're in Joshua 10. So that was Joshua 9. Now we're in Joshua 10, where now he's got to go round up his army and say, we've got to go fight on my behalf. I made a mistake. I made a poor choice to take this treaty. Not only that, but now we've got to travel. And if you study geography at all in this culture, it's 20 miles.
It's a pretty good walk.
It's not a walk in the park. It's 20 miles, but it's 20 miles straight uphill. It's 3,500 feet in elevation. And so he's got to get all of his army all together to go fight for a group of people they don't even know that lied to them. Yeah. And they got to go fight 5 kings and 5 armies all at one time. The Bible's really, really cool. because it talks about how they get there and they take them by surprise. When they take them by surprise, it's just this crazy experience where if you read the root word of what it actually means is that God actually growls. And in the process of God growling, it throws them all into panic. And then they chase them all over and they kill a bunch of people.
Sure.
And then God sends this hailstorm down, and the hailstorm kills more than they kill with the sword, which tells you a lot about God. Like, God's like, you're not killing them fast enough, so I'm going to make this thing done. So then that all takes place. And then what's really, really cool is that in the process of all of this, Joshua realizes the sun is going down. And as the sun is going down, what would they do in these times of war is they would actually like stop fighting and they would come back the next day. And Joshua was like, no. We got to finish this today. We've got to take care of this today. And so Joshua prays this audacious prayer, this courageous prayer where he says, God, would you just make the sun stand still? And literally in that moment, God makes the sun stand still and they conquer them in that moment. So it's just an incredible story of God's faithfulness.
Yeah, it really just kind of looks like when you see all these people kind of coming together, the Israelites, they're going through this thing, and it's just like, wow, the world is against us, nothing can happen. It's like God is still completely in control at all times.
The whole
time. I think that's really powerful, and that's kind of like the story of the book of Joshua is God's always working when you don't see it. He's always doing something, and no matter what you bring to the table, it's probably not going to be enough. So God will always bring the rest.
Yeah, God is always working upstream for them. It's amazing as you read through the story of Joshua. He's always behind the scenes in every area of Joshua's life.
Yeah,
he's constantly saying like, "I've got you. I'm with you. Don't be afraid because I'm here with you in the process of this."
A couple of these like things that we kind of pulled out of this story yesterday. The first one was God's already working in the background for your benefit. So can you share with us a little bit of how that played out in this story and then how we can apply that to our lives?
Yeah, I mean in the book of Joshua. So Joshua chapter 10, verse 8, it says, "Do not be afraid," the Lord said to Joshua, "for I have given you victory over them." He speaks in the past tense, and God does this often to Joshua, where he speaks in the past tense as if to say, like, the victory has already been won. The victory is already over. I've already worked in the background for you. God was doing miracles for Joshua long before Joshua ever asked for the sun to stand still. One of those miracles was he throwing hailstones at these guys. And some of the commentaries I've read before, some of the people I've read before have said it just happened to be a storm that day. Well, why was the hail only hitting the bad guys if that's the case? God was working in their behalf, on their behalf, the entire time, just to get to that point as well. So an incredible story. I mean, you've got Jesus also says the same thing, when he talks about how God is always working in the background of our life. Jesus said in John 16:33, "In this world you'll have trouble, but do not fear. I've overcome the world." Don't lose heart. I have to overcome the world, as if to say like the victory has already been won.
Yeah.
God's working on your behalf, whatever battle you're going through right now, whatever battle I'm going through right now, or whatever battle you're going through right now as you're listening to this today, God is already working in the background.
For sure. Yeah, and then this other main idea that we kind of wrestled with and pulled out yesterday was God honors courageous prayers because courageous prayers honor God. And so at what point did Joshua pray this, like a courageous prayer to God in this story?
Yeah, it was when the sun was going down. And Joshua just simply says, like, God, would you make the sun stand still? And we talked about this yesterday a little bit in the message that Joshua is the 6th book of the Bible. And in the first 5 books of the Bible, you see God do some incredible things. I mean, God continues to do miracle after miracle after miracle, meaning like to us, for Joshua to pray, God, would you make the sun stand still? Like, James, I don't know about you, but like that prayer seems pretty impossible.
That seems like that's a pretty bold prayer.
It's a very impossible prayer in a lot of ways. Joshua's only seen God do the impossible, like over and over. Part of the Red Sea, he stopped the water at the River of Jordan. Like there's moments in time where Joshua continues to see God do impossible things. So all he knows how to do is ask for the impossible.
Yeah.
And we summed this up yesterday by saying when you see God take care of the addiction that you're in, or when you see God take care of the family strife that you go through, or the work situation, or the financial situation, or whatever it is that you go through, when you see God begin to take care of those things in your life, you'll begin to ask more bold and more courageous prayers in the process of that. When you see God do the impossible in your life, then you start to ask for more impossible things to be done in your life.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how the way that Joshua just positions himself of expecting that God's going to move. He's like knows that God's for them, and even knowing like in his mistake, God is still like in his error, in his mistake, he knows like God is still in control. God's still fighting for us. And so he can still boldly approach the throne and ask God to continue to do these things because he knows that God is for him. And I think that's also just relying on the promise that God has already given them. Right. God's already said that this land is going to be yours. And so when you have to walk uphill for 20 miles and you're starting to question during those 20 miles, during that long walk of like, is this really like God's plan for us? Is what God said true? Can we really rely that God's going to protect us as we're going up against these 5 armies? Like you're starting to look at the cards and like, it really kind of comes, the rubber meets the road of, do you really trust that God will keep his promises and that God is who he says he is? And so that's kind of what this story is about and is continuing to be about. And I think that's really cool that God honors courageous prayers because they honor God. I think that that flip on the words is really a cool way to think about it, how those prayers honor God. Yeah. And it's not like just for us. Praying's not just like because God needs to know what's on our heart, but it's for us to realize like, we need to honor God by doing that. It's like showing God like, hey, I have gone to as far as I can go, and now I need you to take it the rest of the way because I can't do it without you. And I think that's pretty powerful as well.
For sure.
But we talked about yesterday of how we can kind of apply some of these things to our life. Some of this story, maybe it's not that we'll be praying that we want hail to be raining down on our enemies. Maybe we won't be praying that. But, in this, what are some ways that we can kind of apply this story and the things that Joshua did and the way that he had faith and honored God through his prayers? How can we start to bring this into our life?
Yeah. So one of the things he said yesterday is that if your situation is too big for you, it's just the right size for God. And the idea behind that, you just hit on it, that it was Joshua's mistake.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy for us a lot of times when we make a mistake or when we're at fault for us to just kind of give up. But Joshua, like, he sees the mistake that he's made. He sees the treaty that he's made with these people, and he realizes like, this is too big for me. But in light of it being too big for me, it's just the right size for God.
Yeah.
That I need to count on God, that God's going to be there with me, that God has already promised me something. So often we give up when we feel like God's promised us something and we don't quite get to that spot. And so I think it's so important for us to understand what it looks like for us to go to God in the process of all of the stuff that we're carrying in our life to say, hey, I've made a mistake. I've racked up this debt. I've gotten this relationship that I shouldn't be in, or this relationship isn't going where it should. My parenting isn't going great. Like all these areas of our life where our work situation, all these areas of our life where we look at it and go, I can't handle this anymore. And we just bring it before God.
Yeah. And then this other one we kind of talked about, this other action step you gave us yesterday was even though God gave the victory, Joshua still had to fight the battle.
For sure.
So what does that look like in our life?
For sure. So it becomes that point where God promised Joshua something. God promised that Joshua was going to win this battle, that he was going to have this land. But Joshua couldn't just go like, thanks, God. Yeah. Have at it. Like Joshua still had to do something in the process. He still had to show up. He still had to get his army together. He still had to march uphill 20 miles in the dark, take them by surprise. He still had to fight the war. He still had to do all the things. And so often when we get in a spot where we feel like, maybe we're stuck in an addiction and we're like, well, God will take care of this addiction. There's some steps we've got to take on our side as well, or this sin issue, or whatever it might be for us. There's still things we've got to do on our side that God can't just take care of all of it. We've got to take some steps in that as well. There's some skin in the game for us as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And so looking ahead, we have one more week in this series, Strong and Courageous. And so we're going to be kind of like wrapping up and just kind of continuing to see how Joshua is still called to be strong and courageous throughout it. But do you know what passage we're going to be in this next week?
We're going to be hitting that very, very key passage where he says, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. That's what we're going to talk about this next week. Going to be an incredible, incredible sermon. I'm excited about where we're headed with that one.
Awesome. Well, everyone, if you didn't hear the sermon on Sunday, you can always find it on our app or at Calvary.ch. And it's a great one. And I want to encourage you, go and read Joshua 9 and 10 again this week and just see how when we position ourselves to expect that God's going to do the impossible, he will. And so our ability to see how God is moving is basically how intentional we are with seeing that in our own lives. So let's be praying bold prayers this week and let's see how God moves. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week.